Hello everyone and welcome to Sunburned. Albino ranks every boss in another crab's treasure from easiest to hardest. This game is not afraid to hide stuff from you, whether it's important abilities, combat mechanic knowledge, or the bosses themselves. So this was a hell of a ranking to put together, but I did my best. Things also vary tremendously depending on your build, so your experience might be drastically different from mine, but that's part of the fun. I went full glass cannon mode, raising nothing but attack until I maxed it out, and then eventually started putting points into resistance and creating a physical tank build where my shell was nigh unbreakable. Lots of mechanics in this game could be considered OP or cheap for a boss ranking, so it's tough to balance, but I tried to rank bosses based on how I perceive their inherent difficulty, regardless of if I steamrolled them with an apparently OP build or not, starting from easiest and working our way to hardest. Number 19, Nephro, Captain of the Guard. The easiest boss in another crab's treasure is Nephro, Captain of the Guard, but that doesn't mean he can't kill you once or twice if you get hit by like 2 attacks. This dude does basically nothing, but your equipment is so garbage in the beginning and you haven't unlocked parrying or rallying yet that he can definitely still be a threat. Nephro has 2 modes of being, relentlessly attacking you until you die, or endlessly running in circles until he dies, and you can try to strafe around and behind him as he runs to ensure that you're dealing with the latter mode. Dodging has to be your main avoidance method since your shells get demolished super quick and you'll get hard punished for bad timing, so take this time to practice reading telegraphs and reacting accordingly. Number 18, the Ceviche Sisters. Once you get the skill tree ability to stick shells onto your fork and swing them like hammers, the physical attack build really starts popping off, as evidenced by me two-shotting one of the sisters. I'm not over-leveled or anything here, I just have the lug nut stowaway that increases my physical damage by 33% at the cost of slower attack speed, and probably a nail to raise my attack by 4 as well. Combine that with the skill tree ability that raises your attack even further when your shell takes damage, and it's a winning combo. Their bullets can be parried, and they don't even really rush to each other's defense at all, so you can just focus one down and destroy it, and then you're basically just fighting a normal enemy. Number 17, Magista, Tyrant of Slacktide. It took me a while to get good at parries, because at first I couldn't figure out if you needed to push block right when you get hit, or release block right when you get hit, because both of them kinda worked sometimes and not others while I was waffling between them, so I didn't trust it much. But from what I've seen, parrying destroys this boss. Obviously now I know it's on release, like you're parrying in Smash Bros, so it eventually became absolutely central to combat. It sucks that I went through the trouble of getting Magista the pearl she wanted, and then she went zombie mode in the first act, so it just spends the rest of the game sitting in my inventory because it isn't valuable enough to sell 100 measly microplastics. That probably isn't even enough to give me an autoimmune disease. Number 16, Voltal the Accumulator. I did some accumulating of my own before this fight, namely the stowaway you can find beforehand that makes you immune to electricity. Could've used that before I died 12 times to that first fucking bullshit lightning lord after the initial magnet puzzle, but I digress. That dude was harder than most bosses, killed me through the wall a few times while otherwise stunlocking me to death. Very cool. Anyway, if you equip that, you can completely ignore like a third of this boss's attacks. You don't need to block or anything. If it's lightning, act like it's not even happening, and just wail on that giant eel. You'll be reduced to just needing to avoid the occasional head slam or gunshot or female pleasure machine. Number 15, Diseased Lycanthrope. With an attack build by this point, you should be doing enough damage to one-shot the little dudes it spits out, which prevents the field from getting too cluttered while you play around the suck attack. That's really the only thing it does that makes a difference, but if you learn the timing and positioning, you can stand at the right range to prepare a charge attack for right when the vacuum closes. His swipes hit hard if you let him, but all in all, it's not a hard boss. Number 14, Polluted Platoon Pathfinder. For being the second boss in the game, this dude has some boldly dangerous attacks, specifically his initial unblockable bottle slam that one-shots you if you get hit by it. If you have enough room to back up the whole time, that can be used to avoid it, otherwise it's so delayed that you might take a couple deaths to nail down the timing. Using the Fizz ability on your tin can shell can stack up a bit of free damage. This is a boss I'd love to parry, but we don't have it yet, so his combos are liable to break you if you don't stay at mid-range to avoid them. Number 13, Royal Shell Splitter. Royal Shell Splitter is your first sort of skill check in the game. You can either come at him right at the beginning with no parry or perks to speak of and have a difficult but doable time as you acclimate yourself to the general gameplay of this video game, or you can wait till you beat Magista and have some real combat tools to contend with his cheese factor. He's got a grab that'll probably one-shot you, and a screen that builds up a fright meter that, if filled, forces you to hold block and walk slowly until it empties, which can make you vulnerable to follow-up unblockable attacks. Shell Splitter teaches teaches you that mashing means death, that you need to carefully choose when to attack and not overcommit to multiple strikes in a row when the boss is idle, a lesson that only applies until you become OP as shit in the late game. Number 12, Scuttling Sludge Steamroller. You think you're playing Deathmatch, he thinks you're playing Turf War. Scuttling Sludge Steamroller paints it black and covers the area in gunk with every attack. How am I supposed to refer to these things in short form? Do I just have to call him by his full name every time, like Joseph Gordon-Levitt? When he starts rolling the roller at you, you can either block and move to the side, or depending on the elevation, you can actually jump right over it and get an aerial hit in. Even if you get gunked a few times, it's not a huge deal. The poison doesn't do a critical amount of damage, but if you'd like to mitigate further, you can find a tissue box shell nearby and use its ability to instantly cleanse yourself of any status effect. I have the Valve thing because I like shells with ridiculously high durability, even at the cost of mobility. Not even really for bosses, but it just makes getting through areas easier, especially sniper nests in any place where they just fill it up with ranged attackers. Did you know you can parry the sniper arrows back at them and one-shot them if you're positioned appropriately? Because I sure didn't until way after I needed that info, and it's very upsetting. Number 11, Curdled Carbonara Connoisseur. Alright, so this is the first boss that I missed in an area and had to come back for it later, so I'm definitely OP here, and I'm just trying not to attack too often so you can see what the guy does. All those attacks that I'm failing to parry or dodge are also for that purpose, definitely. Don't worry about it. I don't think you need to level Vitality in this game if you're going to be exploring enough to find the tentacles that raise your max HP when you collect them. That said, I think by this point I had reached the depths and my attack level was capped, so I put like 6 points into Vitality just to put it somewhere. I positioned this dude based on his moveset and the damage he was still dealing. So this is where I imagine he'd go if you found him when you were supposed to behind that gunk waterfall in the grove. Number 10, the Consortium. Another boss I didn't find right away, but this is a fight where that definitely matters less because of the gimmick. You need to attack all the rope wads and destroy them to take HP off the Consortium, which is just a fancy word for cramped orgy. A man could lose his virginity 8 times simultaneously in there, no hole is safe. The cage flips around enough that most of the ropes are hittable from the ground, but for the ones on top you'll need to grapple up onto the thing. Other than the parry, I think the shell rally mechanic is probably the most important skill you can unlock in the tree, the one that gives you shell health back if you attack an enemy after it takes damage, and with that kind of sustainability and the sheer number of shells scattered around, I would just block everything and not even bother with dodging. Unless you're directly underneath the cage and it readies a blue attack, I would not trust the durability of my shell against being sat on. Number 9, Helkia Intimidation Crab. This boss is like a dream come true. Fighting in an arena surrounded by sushi, my mouth is watering and my wallet is shaking. The shell skill lets you eat back to full health basically too, so if you run out of heart kelp things, all is not lost. Helkia's hitboxes are weird, because sometimes his swipes will just miss for no reason while you're blocking, and his ability to frighten you is undercut by your sushi shell being something you can quickly roll away with if you do get caught in it. He hits decently hard, but he doesn't attack too often or have any complicated strings. In the second phase, he splits the chopsticks incorrectly, the exact same way I do half the time. I'm a sushi with a fork guy, and I am not ashamed. If I went to Japan and served someone a strip of bacon and they picked it up with chopsticks, I wouldn't bully them. I'd be like, that's an authentic commitment to culture right there, and I applaud you. Number 8, Inkerton Crab Hunter. For being Roland's Agent 47, I expected more from this man, but by this point you should be a god at either dodging or parrying or both, and parries are so easy against him it's borderline disappointing, and that's coming from a guy who doesn't like when bosses are ridiculously hard. If you learn the telegraph timing, you can even parry his shotgun poppers, and since he tosses them away every time he uses one, the arena is absolutely littered with replacement shells if yours doesn't have 250 defense like this stillborn baby head I'm wearing. Sometimes I don't know whether to rank bosses based on inherent difficulty or accounting for your likely skill level at the time you face them, but I went with inherent difficulty here since your mileage can vary so much with your build that otherwise engaging encounters can be trivialized. Number 7, Petrock the False Moon. I guess in a game with mimic crabs where you rest by going inside big shells, this was bound to happen sooner or later. This is like if in Dark Souls one of the bonfires got up and started punching you. Petrock is an easily parried boss. All his jump attacks are well telegraphed, and the ground crystals he spawns usually aren't even a factor because you can just stay in the middle of the circle and act like they aren't there. I'm running a heavy strength tank build, like I said, which includes the stowaway lug nut that increases damage by 33% with slower attack speed, but in addition to that, I've got a high-level sinker that raises balance damage by 50%, so staggering people with parries is a cakewalk. When he curls up in his shell and walks towards you, resist the urge to attack because he'll parry you like it's Soviet Russia, but if you internalize how long he spends in there, you can charge up for when he comes out. Number 6, Kamptscha the Bleached Kit. No idea how to pronounce that. I don't think these letters belong in that order. This is where my build goes off the rails, because I maxed out my stowaway capacity and added another sinker to raise my total boosted balance damage to 85%, tossed a dead crab onto my fork for hammer damage and intimidation factor, found the Dark Souls shell with its 350 durability in the Old Ocean City area, raised my resist stat to around 16, and just decided to become an unstoppable force and an immovable object at the same time. Kamptscha couldn't do a goddamn thing. I shucked him up big time, and somehow my hammer lasted the whole fight without needing to be replaced. I also made liberal use of the Worm Trap umami spell you can find in the sands between, behind all those worm traps that aren't properly marked, which I can't tell if that's an oversight or if they just wanted to piss you off by having your shell constantly eaten by worms you can't see in the damn ground. If upgraded, the spell renders enemies immobile for a few seconds, lowers their defense, and does some damage over time while you're free to continue the beatdown. This spell is fucking busted, and I didn't even level up Umami as a stat a single time outside of the skill tree nodes. This is a 2 health bar boss fight that took less than 2 minutes with this setup. I couldn't even really tell you what the dude does other than shed skin like a snake. Number 5, Praia Dubia, the Ocean's Agony. A lot of the fight is against hordes of little crabs, while you have to spend a lot more time dodging projectiles regardless of anything, so mobility is good here. Blocking any of the lasers results in chip damage to your HP, so tanking is less viable. Chitin herself, or at least the entity in her, is mostly unthreatening, and after the crabs are dealt with, she comes down for a bit to just kind of hang out and get walloped. After a bit, she'll decide to stop getting abused and summon more crabs, but if you're fast enough, I feel like you can kill this phase in one cycle, because I almost did even when some of my attacks got interrupted. In the second phase, the entity becomes the final scream, which is also how most of the fights my downstairs neighbor has with his girlfriend end, and you stop having to fight at all. Instead, the projectiles get cranked up to 11, and you just have to outlast the entity as its health slowly dwindles. Having as many max kelp pod upgrades as you can helps, or if you come in with a shell that lets you eat part of it to regain HP. There's nothing to attack in this phase, so the lifesteal stowaway is unfortunately useless. Number 4, Roland Venture Crabitalist. The pinball arena is interesting. Backing up into the bumpers can get you knocked into attacks, so you have to watch your back. Roland himself is decently easy to parry with a 3-piece combo of thrusts or a super delayed triple punch with 3 of his arms or 4 legs or whatever. What I want to know is who thought it was a good idea to give this dude waterfowl dance. In the second phase, he's got an attack where all 6 of his appendages get their own blade and start whirlwinding, and that's your cue to back the hell up, preferably not into an aforementioned bumper. I thought this dude was going to be the final boss based on how the game is set up, so color me surprised when I found that I got 5 more hours of playtime coming up. Number 3, Padgerus the Ravenous. Padgerus is lauded as this unbeatable beast to be reckoned with, and certainly lives up to it for a while, especially if your shell is too weak to sustain a combo. He's got a variety of attacks with all different timings, unblockables, a grab, pretty much runs the whole gambit of stuff that will kill a small crab who isn't still very used to the combat yet. Coming in there later on with a tank shell and the rally mechanic makes it much easier. Number 2, Gravekeeper Tapoda. This is another boss I never found until I looked up a guide on boss locations towards the end to make sure I had gotten them all. I had missed 4. That means I went the entire game without getting the Mantis Punch ability, and thus had no idea what the hell all these giant purple cubes were for, and never upgraded any umami spells, because this is the guy who does that for you. I'm sitting here late game having maxed out the skill tree with 200 extra crystals in my inventory, like damn, they really overpopulated these areas with crystals, why'd they put so many in here? And then I find the Mantis Shrimp like, oh, I should have not skipped some of them. I watched someone appropriately leveled fight this dude and say he was one of the hardest bosses, and based on his fainting trickery with unblockable attacks, I can see it, even in my OP state. He likes to disappear and launch sneak attacks from the shadows and mix up his timing to catch early rolls. It doesn't seem like the hardest thing to get acclimated to, but I can imagine the punishment for mistakes being huge in the early game. Number 1, Firth, the crab who stole the Whorl. Nice title. He did that like 10 seconds ago, in case you forgot why you're fighting him. Sorry, Firth, I don't need a Whorl when I have a Dark Souls helmet. That's part of the disconnect for me in the narrative. Why is my character traipsing through hell and back to recover a shell that isn't even good? It's got 100 durability. The helmet has 350. If I'm Krill, I'm telling that shrimp to fuck off with my shell, because I've collected about 30 better ones so far on my adventure. But it has sentimental value. He's an agoraphobe. If you never want to have to leave the house, you should recognize that getting a better house it's harder to kick you out of is a win. He probably realizes this off-screen, and that's why he ends up giving his shell to the homeless crab, like, hey, no skin off my gooch, I got dozens better where that came from. Anyway, I would talk about Firth, but I don't know what he does, because because he got absolutely demolished by my hulkingly monstrous power. Inherently, he is probably the hardest boss because he's got 2 health bars and he's quick and does high damage and whatnot, but none of that ends up mattering when you're built like an iron leviathan. And that's going to do it for this boss ranking. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like, share, and subscribe. I got boss rankings for dozens of other games too. Watch all my other videos while munching on a rotten banana peel, and I'll see you guys next time.